So, class, hello. This is the first video lecture of chapter 20, right? So, formal terminology. Remember me in the previous introduction video stating that we need to be comfortable using terms, these terms that relate to form, and we need to be comfortable using them correctly, right? So it says in this book, I'm on page 329, of course, the beginning of chapter 20. In chapter 10, you learn the terminology of period forms, such terms as phrase, contrasting period, double period, right? So real quick, let's go back to chapter 10. And let's just review. This is page 170, right? And let's review just these terminologies, right? A phrase, a musical idea, essentially. Relatively independent musical idea terminated by a cadence. Okay, a phrase. Well, what's a phrase? Well, we can probably think like something like this. Right? It goes on to two phrases can be combined to form a period. Right? So, got it. They seem to go together as a musical unit, and if the second phrase ends with a more conclusive cadence than the first. What I just played, Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart, string quartet. Phrase 1. Phrase 2 forms a period, right? Let's go on, and let's see what happens. Well, what was that? Bum bum da 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 dum. Phrase da 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 dum. Phrase 2, so a period. Da 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 dum da 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 dum. I would call that a double period, right? I would call that a double period. Phrase 1. Phrase 2. Right? Okay? So, double periods are just periods, except that each half of the structure consists of two phrases rather than just one, right? Both periods and double periods may be either parallel or contrasting. Parallel meaning containing pretty much the same material, or contrasting being different, according to whether the two halves begin with similar melodic material, right? A repeated phrase or a repeated period does not produce a new kind of formal unit and should not be confused with a period or a double period, right? A phrase group is a group of phrases that seem to belong together without forming a period or a double period, right? If I pull out some Schubert, right? Let's pull out some Schubert dances for the piano, and let's see if we can't analyze this very simply. I'm pulling out Opus 9, D365, the first waltzes by Schubert. What was happening there? And this is where it starts to become a little ambiguous. Is this the phrase? Well, depending on the tempo you're taking, it could be either. I hear it as this. One phrase, period. So 4 phrases. What kind of period would that be then? A double period. 2 phrases for each period, right? Phrase 1, phrase 2, phrase 1, phrase 2. Let's go on. So here's our first phrase. Second phrase. Right? Okay. So we can see that this is constructed of two double periods, right? If we wanted to look at it in a larger sense of the term, we could say that it consists of itself, and the song in its entirety is a double period. In fact, we're going to go back to this Schubert waltz and examples in the book. So now, let's flip back to our chapter 20, and let's go to page 329, right? Let's talk about binary forms. These should be pretty self-explanatory, right? Binary meaning two, so we would label a binary form as simply this. AB, right? Simple enough, right? So, periods and double periods are binary in form, right? Periods, they consist of two phrases. And double periods, well, two periods, right? So it can be binary within binary. The period itself can be binary, and then when you stack the period on top of another period, that could be binary as well. Right? The example they give in the book. Okay, so well let's back up a second. Because of the terms such as parallel period, right? Period consisting of two phrases is more informative, right? We use this term, right? Binary is traditionally reserved for larger forms, right? So, however, in example 20-1, we see familiar tune whose four phrases do not add up to a double period. This is a pretty common song, Greensleeves. Goes on. Right? So if we look in the book, we can label this as binary, right? We have this section to begin with. There's one phrase. Right? Another phrase. Augmented six. So if we look in the book, it tells us that it's the first two systems of music are a period, A prime, right? It's A prime, why? Because the cadences are different at the end of these phrases, right? Then we go on to the next two systems, systems 3 and 4, measures 9 and 13, right? And we see that these are contrasting melodic ideas, but they're very similar in their construction to each other. So, but they still end with different cadence types. So we would call that B prime. So in our book, that's a good representation of how we would graph, right, Greensleeves. The book goes on to explain that although the structure is not a double period because the two authentic cadences, it is a binary form. Furthermore, Greensleeves is a sectional binary form because the first part ends with tonic harmony, right? And the first part of a binary form ends with something other than a tonic triad in the main key of the form. It's called continuous binary, right? Think of sectional. Yes, we are definitely done with a section because we had a cadence ending in our tonic. Continuous, we're still not at our home key, we're going on, we're moving on, and we're still searching for that home key. So think of that as a way to remember what is sectional versus what is continuous, right? The two parts in binary form of example 20-2, now this Bach French suite, right, are quite unequal in length. The second being twice as long as the first, very common with Bach dances, with even Baroque dances, I should say. The first half ends with a perfect authentic cadence in a minor, but because the main key of the piece is not in a minor, not a minor but D minor, this is an example of continuous binary form. Let's look at this, and let's see if we can analyze the phrases. If I took this a little faster, I might be able to hear these phrases a little better. There's one phrase. Right? There's the next phrase, right? We have a half cadence in D minor. Then in A minor, we have a PAC, a perfect authentic cadence. Let's go on to the B section now and let's see what happens. Oh, I see some left hand, some hand switching, register switches of the melody. So, in this second part of this Bach minuet, right, we still have what? One phrase, two phrase, three phrase, four phrases. So whereas the first section, the A section, had two phrases, the B section has four phrases. So when we start to graph things like this, this is an easy way to start graphing things. Such as, okay, I've got a phrase here, right? This is just an idea of how you might graph something like this. You might just start out like this and say, okay, there's my 6 phrases. I know this is A, right? And I know that this is B, right? Okay? So, see if I can get that to focus there. There we go. Then you're going to start to fill in other things. So the book goes on to explain, notice in this example that the second section is constructed largely from the two main motives, right? This motive, right? Very similar to that. Two main motives. However, this is no area of contrast followed by a clearly stated return of the open material. So the example is not in ABA form. Instead, like most binary example, it lies somewhere between A prime and AB. That's up for you to argue, right? Now another term pops up at the bottom of this page 331 where it says repetition does not usually change our formal analysis, right? Good thing to note. If we repeat something, we're not going to sit there and add a whole other section. No, just analyze the piece as if there were no repeats in it. However, movements or themes that consist of 2 repeated sections are so commonly encountered that the special term to reprise form. So if the beginning and the end section repeats, it's to reprise. If just one section repeats, it's single reprised, right? Very simple to remember that, right? Now we have to be careful of one thing though. Of course there's always a snag. There's always a snag, right? We must be careful that some composers write out repeats, right? Some composers say, nope, I'm just going to put in a repeat sign. And some composers say, no, I'm going to write out the music. That's just a preference, right? In either case, we have to be careful, most especially in the latter case of the composer writing out the entire piece of music instead of using repeat signs. We must be careful to carefully analyze and look, is that actually a different section? Or is it truly a continuous, excuse me, not continuous, oh my gosh. What is it? To reprise. Is it a reprisal, right? So composers might write that out, in which case you have to look and find that cutoff and say, is that exactly the same as here in this B section? If it is, it's single reprise. What about the A section? Is the A section 16 measures long with a repeat of 8 measures, just written out, in which case there's a single reprise? And then is the B section 32 measures long? And is the B section really 32 measures long, or is it 16 measures long and it's reprised or repeated? We have to understand that. We have to be able to figure that out, right? Now, the last two terms here are very, very easy to explain and easy to remember. Balanced versus unbalanced binary, right? This is an example of unbalanced binary, right? Unbalanced binary, right? Because the A section's 8 measures and the B section 16 measures. Greensleeve was balanced binary. It was 8 measures, 8 measures. A section was 8 measures, B section was 8 measures. The Schubert dance was, 8 measures, 8 measures. Balanced binary, balanced binary. But now let's go even further. Now we can say, okay, is this continuous binary? Yes, it is. The A section does not end on a tonic D minor. So, it is continuous binary, right? So, how would we label this? We would label this continuous, unbalanced, 2 reprised binary form. A lot. But just think of it as different color combinations. You can combine red and blue, and you can combine red and orange, and you can combine red and green, and then you can combine green and blue. Think about these terms. So, what if it didn't have those repeat signs? Well, then it would be continuous, unbalanced still, because they're unequal, binary. We would not have any reprised. What if just the A section repeated? Then it gets a little bit more hairy, because now the A section, whereas previously 8 measures, is now 16 measures. So what do we do there? You would think they would be balanced, but that's not the case. Even if it's written out or not written out, the length is still the same. It's 8 measures long. The A section is 8 measures. What is repeated twice, 5 times, 16 times? It's still 8 measures long. So in this case, if just the A section was repeated, it would be called continuous still, right? Because we still don't have that authentic cadence. Continuous, unbalanced, single reprise, binary. Okay? So, and when we use the single reprise, we don't have to notate, oh, the A is reprised or the B is reprised. You don't need to do that. We're just labeling the form. So this Bach minuet, from the French suite, it's binary. It is continuous. So we would say Bach's French suite number 1, or what is it? Yeah, suite number 1 minuet is an example of a continuous, unbalanced, 2 reprised binary form, right? So tune into the next video when we start discussing ternary forms, right? Take care, class, and as always, get a hold of me with questions.